How do you explain it when things don't go the way you expect them to? Or more interestingly, how do you explain when others are able to achieve things that defy all the assumptions, despite having access to the same resources, people, and conditions as everyone else? Take Apple for instance. Year after year, they continue to outpace their competitors in innovation and brand loyalty. And yet, at their core, they're just another computer company. They have the same talent pool to hire from, the same consultants, the same advertising agencies. So why is it that they always seem to be different? Or think about Martin Luther King Jr. He wasn't the only man in America who suffered during the civil rights era. He certainly wasn't the only gifted orator. And yet, he was the one who led a movement that changed the nation. Why him? And then there's the story of the Wright brothers. At a time when many teams were racing to build the first human-powered flying machine, some of them with more money, better education, and high-level connections, it was two bicycle shop owners in Ohio who cracked the code and took to the skies. So what's really going on here? Roughly a decade ago, I made a discovery that fundamentally changed the way I see the world and the way I think about leadership and success. What I found was a pattern, a repeatable method, among the world's most inspirational leaders and organizations. Whether it's Apple, Dr. King, or the Wright brothers, they all operate, think, and communicate in the exact same way. And it's the complete opposite of how most people and organizations do it. All I did was codify it. I call it the golden circle. 3 concentric rings: why, how, and what. At the center is the why, your purpose, your cause, your belief, the reason you exist. The next ring is how, your process, your differentiators, your unique strengths. And the outermost ring is what you actually do, the products you sell or the services you offer. Every single person and organization on the planet knows what they do. Some know how they do it. But very, very few know why they do what they do. And by why, I don't mean to make a profit. That's a result. It's always a result. I mean, what's your purpose? What's your cause? What's your belief? Why does your organization exist? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? And why should anyone care? As it turns out, the most successful and inspiring leaders all start with why. They communicate from the inside out. But the rest of the world? They do it backwards. They start with what, then move to how. And they may never even touch the why. Let's go back to Apple to illustrate this. If Apple were like everyone else, a marketing message from them might sound something like this: we make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one? That's how most of us communicate. We say what we do, how we're different, or how we're better, and then we expect people to take action. But that's not inspiring. Now here's how Apple actually communicates. Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers. Want to buy one? It's completely different. And it's far more compelling. What Apple does isn't fundamentally different from its competitors. What makes Apple different is that it communicates from the inside out. People don't buy what you do. They buy why you do it. And what you do simply serves as the proof of what you believe. This is why Apple can sell not just computers, but also MP3 players, phones, tablets, and watches. Their why, we believe in thinking differently, is consistent across everything they do. So when Apple launches a new product in a different category, people don't question it. They trust it because they believe in the company's purpose. Meanwhile, companies like Dell or Gateway struggle to sell even similar products in new categories. Remember when Dell tried to launch MP3 players and PDAs? The products were fine, the technology was solid, but nobody bought them. Why? Because people didn't associate Dell with a belief system. They just saw them as a computer company. This idea that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it, is more than just a catchy slogan. It's a law of human behavior. And it's backed by biology, not psychology. Because when we communicate from the outside in, starting with what and how, people can understand vast amounts of information, but it doesn't drive behavior. That's because it speaks to the rational brain. But when we communicate from the inside out, starting with why, we're speaking directly to the part of the brain that controls decision-making. It's emotional, it's primal, and it's powerful. And here's the most incredible part. This pattern isn't just for corporations or historical figures. It applies to anyone. Whether you're leading a company, running a nonprofit, launching a startup, or just trying to make an impact in your community, starting with why is the single most effective way to inspire action. In the next section, we'll dive deeper into how biology, yes, your actual brain, supports this whole idea. We'll look at how our limbic system makes decisions long before our rational mind catches up, and why appealing to belief, not just logic, is what moves people to act. If you're enjoying this breakdown of what makes great leaders and organizations truly stand out, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We're just getting started, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. To truly understand why the Golden Circle model works, why starting with why is so profoundly effective, we need to take a closer look at how our brains are wired. This isn't just theory or motivational fluff. It's biology. It's rooted in the actual structure of the human brain. Picture a cross-section of the human brain viewed from the top down. What you'd see is essentially a perfect visual match for the Golden Circle. The outermost part of the brain is called the neocortex. This is the newest part in our evolutionary history, hence the prefix neo. The neocortex corresponds to the what level of the Golden Circle. It's responsible for rational, analytical thought and language. It processes facts, figures, and data. It's where we can understand complex ideas, crunch numbers, and explain things in a logical way. But just inside the neocortex are the limbic brains, the parts of the brain that correspond to the how and why levels of the Golden Circle. These regions are responsible for our feelings, trust, loyalty, empathy. They also control all human behavior, all decision-making. But here's the catch: they have no capacity for language. In other words, when we make decisions based on gut feelings, we're actually using the limbic part of our brain. And because it doesn't control language, we often struggle to explain why we feel the way we do. That's why you'll hear people say things like, "It just doesn't feel right," or "I can't explain it, but something about this feels off." Those aren't irrational reactions. They're deeply rooted neurological responses. So when we communicate starting with what, we're talking to the rational brain. People may understand what we're saying, but that's not what drives action. It's when we speak directly to the why, the part of the brain that controls behavior, that we actually influence decision-making. That's the power of starting from the inside out. This is why you can give someone all the right data, present them with all the logical reasons, and still not change their mind. Logic doesn't drive behavior. Belief does. And the moment you start communicating your purpose, your cause, your belief, your why, you tap into something far more compelling than features or benefits. You make people feel something. And those feelings lead to action. Now, this doesn't mean logic and facts are irrelevant. They still play a role. But they serve to support the decision, not to make it. Think of the rational brain as the tool we use to justify decisions made by the emotional brain. We feel first, then we think. We believe, then we rationalize. This also explains why great leaders are often described as charismatic. It's not because they are necessarily better speakers, more intelligent, or even more confident. It's because they lead with belief. They start with why. And that belief resonates with people at a core, emotional level. It's not charisma that makes them effective, it's clarity of purpose. If you know your why, and you act consistently with it, people will naturally follow you, not because they have to, but because they want to. They'll trust you. They'll believe in you. And they'll stick with you even when things get tough. Nowhere is this more evident than in the hiring process. Think about it. Most companies hire based on skills and qualifications. They look for people who can do the job. But the best leaders go a step further. They look for people who believe what the organization believes. Because when you hire people just because they can do a job, they'll work for your money. But when you hire people who share your belief, they'll work for you with blood, sweat, and tears. This is not a poetic exaggeration. It's observable, repeatable, and consistent. It's the foundation of strong company cultures, lasting loyalty, and transformational leadership. And the same principle applies in reverse. When customers believe what you believe, they'll buy from you not because you have the best product, but because your product is an extension of their identity. They see themselves in your brand. Remember, people don't buy what you do. They buy why you do it. Let's return to Apple for a moment. Apple's belief in thinking differently attracts customers who also see themselves as creative, innovative, and forward-thinking. Buying an Apple product isn't just a transaction, it's an affirmation of personal identity. That's why people line up overnight to buy a new iPhone, even though they could get a comparable phone from another brand more easily and often for less money. They're not just buying a phone. They're reinforcing what they believe about themselves. This deep connection doesn't come from clever marketing tactics. It comes from consistency. When your what and your how clearly reflect your why, people trust you. They feel safe with you. And they become loyal, not just to the product, but to the cause. And that kind of loyalty is priceless. In the next section, we'll put this principle to the test by looking at two real-world stories, one of spectacular success and one of quiet failure. Both had the same resources. Both had similar goals. But only one of them started with why, and that made all the difference. If you're finding value in this, and you want to keep learning how powerful leadership really works, hit that subscribe button. You're here because you want to lead with impact, and that journey is just beginning. Let's look at a real-life example that perfectly illustrates how starting with why leads to success, and how ignoring it leads to failure. At the dawn of the 20th century, humanity was obsessed with achieving powered, controlled flight. It was the moonshot of the era. Brilliant minds, wealthy investors, and scientific institutions were all racing to be the first to build a flying machine. One of the most well-funded and well-connected individuals in this race was Samuel Pierpont Langley. Langley had every advantage you could imagine. He was backed by a $50,000 grant from the U.S. War Department, a massive sum at the time. He held a prestigious position at Harvard. He worked with the Smithsonian. He had access to the most brilliant minds and engineers available. The media followed his efforts closely, and everyone expected him to win. And yet, you've probably never heard of him. At the same time, a few hundred miles away in Dayton, Ohio, two brothers were quietly working on the same problem. Orville and Wilbur Wright had no funding. No government grants. No formal education in engineering. They ran a bicycle shop to fund their experiments. No one in the press followed them. They didn't have a single major name attached to their project. By all conventional measures, they were destined to fail. So why did the Wright brothers succeed where Langley failed? Because the Wright brothers had something Langley didn't. They had a cause. A belief. A why. They didn't set out to become rich or famous. They didn't care about being first in the newspapers. They were driven by the idea that if they could crack the code of flight, they could change the course of human history. They were pulled forward by belief, not pushed by ambition. Langley, on the other hand, was after the result. He wanted the fame. He wanted the recognition. He was chasing the outcome, not the purpose. And it showed. The people who worked with the Wright brothers weren't doing it for money. They believed in the mission. They shared the vision. They were willing to work through bitter cold, dangerous crashes, and endless failures because they believed in what they were building. Langley's team, however, was filled with paid professionals. Talented, yes, but uninspired. They showed up for the paycheck, not for the cause. And when the Wright brothers made history on December 17, 1903, with the first powered, controlled flight, Langley didn't congratulate them. He didn't build upon their work. He quit. The moment he realized he wouldn't be first, he walked away. That's the power of why. When your motivation is clear and authentic, people will join you. They will sacrifice for you. They will give you everything they have, not because they have to, but because they want to. And when your motivation is shallow, transactional, or self-serving, people sense it. They may work with you for a time, but they won't follow you when it matters most. There's another famous example of this principle in action, Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King was not the only person in the American South affected by racial injustice. He was not the only preacher. He wasn't even the best speaker. But he had a cause. He had a belief that all people should be treated equally, not just in law, but in dignity and respect. And that belief resonated. He didn't go around giving people a 12-point plan for changing America. He said, I have a dream. A dream is a vision, not a checklist. It's something people can believe in. And they did. On August 28, 1963, 250,000 people showed up to the Lincoln Memorial to hear Dr. King speak. There were no formal invitations. No social media posts. No mass email campaigns. And yet 250,000 people made the journey. Why? Because they believed in what he believed. They weren't there for him. They were there for themselves. For their own hopes. Their own dreams. Their own belief in a better future. And Dr. King simply gave voice to that belief. This is what happens when you lead with why. You attract those who share your values. You inspire action not through coercion but through connection. And notice how consistent this pattern is. Whether it's Apple inspiring millions of loyal customers or the Wright brothers changing the course of history, or Dr. King mobilizing a generation, none of it started with a product, a plan, or a strategy. It started with a belief. This is also why the most successful movements are organic. They grow not because of marketing budgets or press releases, but because people tell other people. Because when we find something that aligns with what we believe, we don't keep it to ourselves. We share it. Now let's flip this around. What happens when companies or leaders don't know their why? When they start with what? Let's take a look at TiVo. When TiVo launched, it was a revolutionary product. It could pause live television, skip commercials, record your favorite shows automatically. It was brilliantly engineered, perfectly timed, well-funded, and utterly misunderstood. What? Because TiVo led with what? They told people what their product did, stop, rewind, record, but they never told people why it mattered. They never connected with the beliefs of their customers. People didn't get it. Some even found it creepy. Sales flopped. Stock prices plummeted. And despite having a product that changed how we watch TV, TiVo never became a household name in the way they should have. Compare that to Apple's iPod. It wasn't the first MP3 player. It wasn't even the best in terms of storage or features. But Apple said, 1,000 songs in your pocket. That's not a what, that's a why. It's a vision, a promise, a feeling. And it worked. Because people don't buy what you do. They buy why you do it. In the next section, we'll break down how innovation spreads, and why understanding your why is crucial to reaching the tipping point where your ideas take off. We'll explore what's called the law of diffusion of innovation and why most businesses never cross the chasm into widespread success. So if you want to understand how ideas go from niche to mass adoption, make sure you stick around. And if you haven't yet, click that subscribe button, because the real breakthrough comes next. If you've ever wondered why some ideas take off while others never make it past the starting line, you're not alone. There's actually a well-documented pattern that explains how innovation spread through society. It's called the law of diffusion of innovation, and it holds the key to understanding why, starting with why, isn't just powerful, it's essential. This law breaks the population down into 5 categories based on how quickly people adopt new ideas. At the very beginning, you have the innovators, about 2.5% of the population. These are the pioneers, the tinkerers, the ones who line up for 6 hours in the cold just to be the first to try something new. They're not driven by logic or proof, they're driven by belief. They take risks and lead the way. Next, you have the early adopters, about 13.5% of the population. These people are thoughtful and influential. They may not invent the future, but they're the first to embrace it. They're comfortable making decisions based on intuition, belief, and gut feeling. They don't need mass validation to act. They trust themselves. Together, innovators and early adopters make up 16% of the population. And here's the catch. This small group holds the power to make or break your idea. If you don't win over this 16%, your innovation will never reach the mass market. That's where most businesses and leaders stumble. They hit what's known as the chasm, a gap between early adopters and the early majority. The early majority, about 34% of the population, are more pragmatic. They don't jump on trends. They want proof. They need reassurance. They wait to see if something works before they commit. And then there's the late majority, another 34%, and the laggards, 16%. Those who adopt only when they have no other choice. So what does this mean for you? If your goal is to reach mass market adoption, whether it's selling a product, building a movement, or launching a new idea, you need to start by winning over the people who believe what you believe. You need to inspire the innovators and early adopters. And you can't do that by leading with what? You have to lead with why. Here's the key insight. Early adopters don't buy what you do. They buy why you do it. They don't need proof. They need belief. And when you give them something they believe in, they become your most powerful allies. They spread the word. They evangelize. They become your voice in the market. Let's bring this back to Apple for a moment. When Apple releases a new product, you'll always find a group of people lined up outside the store days in advance. What? Not because they need a new phone. Not because they've done a side-by-side comparison of technical specs. They do it because they want to be first. They want to be part of something bigger. They want to be aligned with a brand that reflects what they believe about the world. It's not about the product. It's about identity. This is why when Apple says, "Think different," it resonates. It speaks directly to the people who see themselves as creative, nonconformist, and forward-thinking. Those people will buy anything Apple puts out, not because of the features but because of the feeling. The why. Now contrast that with TiVo. TiVo had a product that was arguably more revolutionary than the iPod. It gave people control over their TV viewing like never before. But they made a fatal mistake. They started with what? Their marketing was all about features. Pause live TV, skip commercials, record your favorite shows automatically. But there was no why. People didn't know what TiVo stood for. They didn't know what it believed. So they didn't buy in. They didn't feel connected. And as a result, TiVo never crossed the chasm. Despite having the best technology, they failed to capture the hearts of the early adopters. Because people don't buy products. They buy stories. They buy feelings. They buy belief. Let's use another lens to look at this: politics. Politicians often lay out detailed plans, point by point, hoping to win over voters with logic. But that's not what inspires action. That's not what fills stadiums. The most inspiring political movements in history didn't start with policy, they started with purpose. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't get up in front of 250,000 people and say, "I have a plan." He said, "I have a dream." That's a why statement. A belief. A vision of a better future. And that's what people rallied behind. That dream wasn't about Dr. King. It wasn't even just about civil rights. It was about what people believed America could be. It was about hope, dignity, equality. And because he spoke from that place of belief, people followed him, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Because he gave voice to something they already felt. And just like the Wright brothers and Apple, Dr. King didn't invent something new, he gave people a reason to care. That's what leadership is. Now, this concept may feel simple, but it's deceptively powerful. Because the moment you start with why, you separate yourself from the noise. Most people are shouting what and how. Few are whispering why. But it's the why that cuts through. So how do you apply this? If you're trying to grow your audience, attract customers, hire the right people, or build a loyal community, don't start by explaining what you offer. Start by articulating what you believe. Why do you do what you do? What's the cause? What's the higher purpose that drives you? That's what people want to follow. That's what people remember. That's what creates loyalty. In the next section, we'll go even deeper into how to turn this belief into consistent action, and why alignment between your why, your how, and your what is what separates truly great leaders and organizations from everyone else. Because it's not just about knowing your why, it's about living it. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what's coming next, because now we're going to connect belief with behavior, and show you how the most successful leaders keep their message consistent across everything they do. So far, we've talked about the power of starting with why. We've looked at how it influences decision-making, inspires loyalty, and helps leaders and organizations stand out in a crowded world. But here's where it gets even more crucial. Clarity of why means nothing without consistency and discipline. Because if people buy why you do what you do, then everything you say and do must be consistent with that why. That's where the real trust is built. Let's break this down. There are 3 components to the golden circle: why, how, and what. The why is your purpose, your belief. The how are the values or principles that guide how you bring your why to life. And the what is the result, the tangible proof of your belief. When all 3 are in harmony, trust emerges. But when there's misalignment, when what you do doesn't match what you say you believe, people feel it. They might not always articulate it, but they sense the dissonance. And that's where doubt creeps in. That's where loyalty breaks down. Think about it like this. A company might say they believe in innovation, but if their products feel outdated, their service is slow, and they resist change internally, no one's going to buy that message. The problem isn't the belief, it's the inconsistency. True leadership is about being clear on your why, and then having the discipline to hold yourself and your organization accountable to it every day. Let's return to Apple one more time, because they are a masterclass in this alignment. Apple doesn't just say they believe in thinking differently, they demonstrate it in everything they do. From product design to marketing, from packaging to retail stores, everything is intentional, clean, minimal, intuitive. It reflects their core belief that great technology should be human-centered and beautifully simple. Even their decisions about what not to do reflect their why. They don't chase every market. They don't flood the world with a dozen variations of the same product. They focus. They simplify. They lead with belief. And because their how and what match their why, people trust them deeply. This level of discipline doesn't happen by accident. It requires constant vigilance. Because the bigger you get, the more tempting it is to stray from your core, to chase trends, to dilute your message. But great leaders don't compromise the why for short-term wins. Let's look at this in a different domain: hiring. When a company is clear about its why, the hiring process changes. You're not just looking for skill sets. You're looking for cultural fit, for belief alignment. Imagine 2 candidates. Both have the technical qualifications. Both can do the job. But one of them clearly believes in your mission, resonates with your values, and talks about the future in ways that align with your vision. That's the person you want. Because here's what happens when you hire based on belief. You don't just get an employee. You get an advocate. Someone who will go above and beyond, not because they're told to, but because they want to. Because they see their work as an extension of their identity. That's the kind of team that changes companies. That builds movements. This is just as true for customers. Think about why people are loyal to certain brands even when competitors offer cheaper prices or better specs. It's not about the transaction, it's about the relationship. It's emotional. When people believe what you believe, they'll forgive your mistakes, pay more for your products, and promote your brand without being asked. And this is exactly why consistency is king. You cannot claim to care about customers and then treat them like numbers. You cannot say you value quality and then cut corners. Every decision is a signal. Every action either builds trust or erodes it. Trust isn't built through a single moment. It's accumulated over time through repeated behavior. It's the result of alignment. Let's look at a quick story to illustrate this. There's a reason Southwest Airlines earned such a strong reputation for customer loyalty over the years. It's not just because of cheap flights. It's because of their why, democratizing the skies, making air travel accessible, fun, and people-focused. Everything they did, from letting flight attendants crack jokes to refusing to charge baggage fees, was consistent with that belief. They made flying less corporate and more human. And passengers felt that. Now compare that to airlines that try to mimic Southwest's humorous tone without adopting their core belief. It feels fake. It doesn't land. Because people can tell when something's off. The tone doesn't match the culture. The words don't match the behavior. And so, the trust never forms. Authenticity isn't just about being honest. It's about being consistent. About living your values out loud. About making sure your how and your what are constant reflections of your why. This is why great leaders don't just articulate the vision. They embody it. They live it. They make sure that the why isn't just written on the wall. It's woven into the DNA of the organization. And when everyone in the organization understands and believes in the why, decision-making becomes clearer. You don't need 100-page manuals or endless approval chains. You just ask, does this action align with our belief? If yes, move forward. If no, rethink. Clarity, discipline, and consistency, these are the marks of enduring leadership. In the next section, we'll explore what happens when organizations or individuals forget their why. We'll look at what causes drift, how companies lose their way, and what it takes to rediscover purpose after straying too far. So stay with us. And if this message is resonating with you, make sure you're subscribed, because the next part might just explain why so many good ideas fade away, and how to bring them back to life. What happens when an organization forgets its why? It's one of the most common and dangerous problems that leaders face. Not because it happens suddenly, but because it happens slowly, quietly, incrementally. Until one day the organization that once stood for something powerful becomes just another company selling products or pushing services, disconnected from the purpose that once made them great. This drift doesn't usually come from malice. It comes from success. Here's how it happens. An individual or small team starts with a belief, a cause worth fighting for. They turn that belief into action. And those actions produce results. The company grows. The mission gains traction. Success follows. But then, instead of doubling down on the belief that fueled the success, the focus shifts. From why to what? Instead of continuing to lead with purpose, they begin to lead with metrics, market share, quarterly reports. Growth becomes the new purpose. Performance replaces passion. And slowly, the culture starts to change. The story that once inspired people becomes a slogan on a wall. The employees who once felt driven start to feel lost. Customers begin to sense something's off. And trust begins to fade. This phenomenon is so common that it has a name in the business world: the split. The split happens when there's a disconnect between what an organization does and why it does it. And once that split appears, it widens. Without course correction, it leads to decline. Let's take an example: Walmart. When Sam Walton founded Walmart, his why was clear. He wanted to help people, especially those in small towns, live better lives by saving money. Save money. Live better. That wasn't just a tagline. It was a belief that drove every decision. Walton famously kept costs down not just for customers, but internally too. He flew coach. He kept corporate overhead low. His stores focused on community. Employees believed in the mission. Customers did too. But over time, as Walmart grew and leadership changed, the focus shifted. The company became obsessed with cutting prices, not as a way to help customers live better, but simply as a competitive advantage. The company began squeezing suppliers, slashing employee benefits, and making decisions that were clearly more about growth than belief. What once felt authentic started to feel corporate. The why was buried under bureaucracy. And while Walmart remains one of the largest retailers in the world, its brand loyalty and cultural standing have taken major hits. The split cost them more than market share. it cost them trust. Now contrast this with a company like Patagonia. Patagonia's why is simple and powerful: we're in business to save our home planet. That belief drives everything they do, from the materials they use to the causes they support to the way they treat their employees. They've made radical decisions that don't always make short-term business sense. They've run ads telling people not to buy their jackets. They've given away their Black Friday profits to environmental causes. In 2022, their founder literally gave the company away, transferring ownership to a trust dedicated to environmental protection. Why? Because their belief comes first. And as a result, they've built a brand that customers trust deeply. They don't just buy Patagonia products, they buy into Patagonia's mission. That's the difference between growth built on belief and growth built on performance alone. The same principle applies to individuals. When people lose touch with their why, their work becomes hollow. You've probably felt it yourself, when you're just going through the motions, checking boxes, doing what's expected but feeling disconnected. It's not that the work is bad. It's that the purpose is missing. Purpose gives meaning. And when you have it, you're willing to endure setbacks, navigate uncertainty, and keep pushing forward. But without it, even success can feel empty. That's why rediscovering your why is one of the most important things you can do, both as a leader and as a person. So how do you do that? Start by asking hard questions. What is the cause or belief that originally inspired you? What made you take the risk in the first place? What is the impact you truly want to make? Then, look at your current actions. Are they aligned with that original belief? If someone walked into your organization today, would they be able to see your why in action, or just hear it in your marketing? If you find a gap, don't panic. Every great leader faces this moment. The goal isn't perfection. It's course correction. The courage to realign your actions with your beliefs. Howard Schultz, the former CEO of Starbucks, had one of these moments. In the early days, Starbucks wasn't about coffee, it was about creating a third place, a warm, inviting environment between home and work. But as the company grew, it started to drift. Stores became more transactional. The experience was diluted. So Schultz came back. And one of the first things he did was close 7,100 stores in a single day, to retrain baristas on how to make the perfect espresso. That decision cost millions. But it was a signal. Starbucks was going back to its why. And it worked. The brand rebounded. Trust was restored. Because people could feel the difference. The truth is, belief isn't something you can fake. It shows up, or it doesn't. And when you lose sight of your why, people can tell. Customers can tell. Employees can tell. The market can tell. But the good news is, you can always go back. You can always realign. You can always choose to lead with purpose again. In the next section, we'll dive into how to clearly define your why, whether you're a solo entrepreneur, a team leader, or a global organization, and how to use it to make decisions, shape culture, and inspire loyalty in everything you do. So if you're ready to turn purpose into action, make sure you're subscribed. Because in the next part, we're going to give you the tools to take everything we've discussed and put it into practice, for real results. We've seen the power of leading with why. We've seen how it inspires loyalty, drives innovation, and builds trust. But now comes the practical part. How do you actually discover and define your why? Because let's be honest, for many people and organizations, purpose feels vague. It sounds nice. It feels good. But when it comes to articulating it clearly, turning that feeling into words, most people struggle. And that's totally normal. Finding your why isn't about inventing something. It's about uncovering what's already there. Your why is not about what you aspire to be. It's about who you already are at your best. Let's start with a foundational truth. Your why comes from your past, not your future. It's born out of your experiences, moments that shaped you, defined you, and gave you a sense of meaning. Those moments are the key. Because your why is not made up, it's discovered. It's the thread that connects your life's most impactful events. For individuals, the process of finding your why begins by identifying what we call stories of significance. These are moments from your life where you felt proud, fulfilled, alive. Moments when you were at your best and contributing to something larger than yourself. What were you doing? Who were you with? What made that moment feel so important? When you start collecting those stories and analyzing them, patterns begin to emerge. You'll notice recurring themes. Maybe it's helping others grow, or creating order from chaos, or standing up for what's right. Those themes point to your why. And when you distill those themes down into a single, clear statement, you've got your why. Here's a simple structure that works for most people. 2. Contribution, so that, impact. It's not a tagline. It's not a slogan. It's a guiding star. For example, one person's why might be to inspire people, to live with authenticity so that they can build more meaningful relationships. Another might be to create clarity out of complexity so that others can make confident decisions. Notice how each why is focused not on the self but on service. It's not about what you get, it's about what you give. Now, for organizations, the process is similar. But instead of individual stories, you look at your company's founding moments, cultural high points, and stories from customers and employees that exemplify your impact. Ask, when have we made the biggest difference? What are the moments that make us most proud? What kind of change have we helped create? From those stories, extract the beliefs that drive your organization. Then articulate them in a way that is simple, clear, and actionable. Take IKEA for instance. They don't just sell furniture. Their why is to create a better everyday life for the many people. Everything they do, from flat pack design to affordable pricing to sustainable practices, flows from that belief. Or consider Southwest Airlines. Their why isn't cheap flights. It's to connect people to what's important in their lives through friendly, reliable, and low-cost air travel. That why influences hiring, customer service, route planning, everything. The key is clarity. If your why isn't clear, it can't inspire. And if it's not actionable, it can't lead. But once you know your why, once you can put it into words, something amazing happens. Decision-making becomes easier. You don't have to agonize over every choice. You simply ask, does this align with our why? If yes, you move forward. If no, you pause. This alignment is what gives organizations integrity. It's what makes leaders trustworthy. Because when your actions match your beliefs, people believe in you. Let's say you're building a business and you're trying to decide whether to launch a new product. If your why is to empower people to take control of their health, then you evaluate the new product against that belief. Will it truly empower your customers? Will it reinforce that purpose? If the answer is yes, it's not just a product, it's a manifestation of your belief. And that's powerful. The same logic applies to hiring. When your why is clear, you can attract people who share your values. You're not just offering a job, you're inviting someone to join a cause. And that creates unity, cohesion, culture. And here's a crucial insight. Your how and what can evolve, but your why should not. Your why is like your DNA. It doesn't change. It stays constant. What you do and how you do it may adapt to changing circumstances, markets, or technologies, but your purpose remains the same. Let's look at an example. Disney's why isn't to make movies. It's to create happiness. That's why they can expand from films to theme parks to cruises to streaming services, all different what's but united by one why. Compare that to Blockbuster, whose what was renting videos. When streaming disrupted the market, Blockbuster didn't adapt. Not because they couldn't, but because they had no deeper why. Without purpose, there was nothing to guide innovation. Nothing to anchor strategy. And so, they vanished. That's why the most enduring companies are purpose-driven. They don't cling to what they do. They cling to why they do it. And that gives them the flexibility to evolve without losing themselves. But defining your why isn't enough. You have to communicate it. Live it. Embed it into every part of your organization, from hiring to marketing to customer service. Because the moment your behavior contradicts your belief, trust erodes. People don't just listen to what you say. They watch what you do. And if there's a gap, they'll notice. So, how do you make sure your why is visible? Start with storytelling. Share the origin story of your organization. Talk about the belief that got you started. Celebrate the moments that reflect your purpose. Reinforce your values constantly. Then, use your why to shape policies and decisions. Make it part of onboarding. Build it into performance reviews. Let it influence everything from product development to partnerships. And most importantly, measure alignment, not just performance. Don't just ask, are we hitting our targets? Ask, are we living our purpose? Because that's what sustains long-term success. In the next section, we'll talk about the power of belief-based leadership, and why people are far more likely to follow those who inspire them, even if they have no formal authority. We'll explore how leaders can earn loyalty, build momentum, and move people, not by command but by conviction. Make sure to subscribe, because now we're about to shift the lens from organizational purpose to personal influence. And it might just change the way you lead forever. So far, we've explored how organizations that lead with why inspire trust, build loyalty, and sustain long-term success. But this principle doesn't just apply to companies, it applies to individuals too. Because at the heart of every great movement, every transformational business, and every cultural shift, there's a person, a leader, who knew how to inspire. And here's the truth: leadership is not about authority. It's about influence. Some people have titles, managers, directors, CEOs, but they're not necessarily leaders. They may have control, but that doesn't mean they have followers. Real leaders don't lead because they have to. They lead because people choose to follow them. That's the difference. People follow those who inspire them, not those who command them. That inspiration comes from belief, from a clear sense of why. The leaders who move us aren't the ones who tell us what to do. They're the ones who remind us of what we believe, who help us connect our own values to a larger cause, who lead from the inside out. And this is where the power of belief-based leadership becomes real. Think about someone you consider a great leader. Maybe it's someone you worked with. Maybe it's a public figure. Now ask yourself, what made them inspiring? Chances are it wasn't their technical skills. It wasn't their resume. It was something deeper, something emotional, something human. They had conviction, clarity, a sense of purpose, and they acted in a way that was consistent with that purpose. You trusted them, not because they were perfect but because they were real. This is what Simon Sinek calls the celery test. Let's say you believe in healthy living. That's your why. And you go to a conference and people give you advice. You should try Oreos, one says. You should get M&Ms, another says. Someone else suggests celery. When you come home from the store with celery, people know something about you. They understand what you believe without you even saying a word. But if you come home with Oreos, M&Ms, and celery, your message is unclear. People don't know what you stand for. Your actions are all over the place. The celery test is about alignment. When your decisions consistently reflect your why, your message becomes clear. You become trustworthy. People know what to expect from you. And in leadership, clarity is everything. When leaders have clarity of purpose and communicate it effectively, they don't need to micromanage. People understand the vision. They feel ownership. They step up, not because they're told to but because they want to. This is especially important during uncertainty. In times of crisis or change, people don't need more rules. They need more clarity. They need to be reminded of the why, of what really matters. Let's take a moment to look at a powerful example. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We've mentioned him before, but let's go deeper into why he was such an effective leader. Dr. King didn't have a title that gave him authority over millions of people. He wasn't elected. He didn't hold office. And yet, hundreds of thousands of people followed him, marched with him, risked their lives alongside him. Why? Because he led with belief. He had a vision of a more just and equal society, a dream. And he communicated that dream so clearly, so passionately, that it became other people's dream too. He didn't say, "I have a plan." He said, "I have a dream." That single sentence elevated a movement. It connected deeply with people's values and aspirations. And when people believe in the dream, they don't need convincing. They act. They commit. They stay through adversity. That's the power of belief-based leadership. It's the same reason why some managers inspire loyalty and others face constant turnover. The most effective leaders don't just manage tasks, they lead people. They connect with their teams on a human level. They share a sense of why. And it works both ways. If you're a leader, whether you manage a team of 5 or run a company of 5,000, your job is not just to get people to follow your instructions. Your job is to create an environment where people feel connected to a larger purpose. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to be clear on the why. That clarity becomes the compass for the entire organization. And when people have a compass, they don't need a map for every situation. They can make decisions on their own. They can lead from within. They can contribute in ways you never even imagined. This is how you build a culture of leadership, not a hierarchy of control. It's also how you attract the right people. Because here's another essential truth. When you lead with why, you attract those who believe what you believe. That's the foundation of real connection, real loyalty. Think about brands or causes you're passionate about. Why do you support them? It's not because of a feature or a discount. It's because you believe in what they represent. They say something about who you are. That belief is what keeps you coming back. The same applies to people. We're drawn to those who reflect our values. And when we find someone who's clear about their beliefs and lives them, we're willing to follow them anywhere. That's the kind of leader worth becoming. So how do you start? First, get clear on your own why. Ask yourself, what's the cause I'm fighting for? What kind of impact do I want to make? What am I willing to stand for, even when it's hard? Then make that belief visible. Talk about it. Act on it. Use it as the foundation for every decision you make. When you do that consistently, you'll find that people start to respond. They lean in. They pay attention. And eventually they follow, not because they're told to, but because they're inspired. In the next section, we're going to explore how belief spreads. We'll look at the social mechanics behind inspiration, how people share ideas, how trust scales, and why movements catch fire when purpose becomes collective. If you're ready to become not just a better leader but a catalyst for change, make sure to subscribe, because this is where it all begins to multiply. Belief is powerful on its own, but its true potential is unlocked when it spreads. Because when a belief becomes shared, it becomes a movement. And when a movement grows, it gains momentum. But this kind of momentum doesn't come from pushing products, enforcing compliance, or shouting louder than everyone else. It comes from connection. It comes from trust. In this section, we'll explore how beliefs scale, how trust expands through a network, and why people don't just buy into ideas. They carry them forward when those ideas reflect their own values. Let's start with a simple concept. People don't buy into you, they buy into themselves. Your belief becomes powerful when it helps people articulate and act on what they already feel deep down. That's when they make it their own. That's when they start to spread it, not because you ask them to, but because they want to. This is how ideas go viral. Not through better tactics. Through deeper alignment. Let's revisit Martin Luther King Jr. one more time. On August 28, 1963, 250,000 people showed up to the National Mall in Washington, D.C., not because they were told to, but because they wanted to be part of something. There were no email lists, no text blasts, no social media posts, and yet they came. Some traveled for hours, by bus, by car, on foot. Why? Because they weren't just attending an event. They were expressing a belief. Dr. King gave voice to that belief, but he didn't control it. The civil rights movement wasn't a centralized machine, it was a network of people united by a shared why. They weren't following a leader as much as they were living out their values. That's why the movement endured. That's why it grew. This is what happens when leadership becomes distributed. In organizational terms, this is how great cultures form. When your why is clear and consistently communicated, it starts to take root in others. People begin to internalize it. They start making decisions not because a policy told them to, but because their belief told them to. You're no longer the only one carrying the flag. Others start carrying it with you. This is how movements are built. And here's the key, you can't control a movement, you can only lead it. That means letting go of control and trusting that others will live out the purpose in their own way. It means giving people the freedom to act while anchoring them in a shared belief. One of the most elegant examples of this is the U.S. Marine Corps. The Marines are known for discipline, precision, and cohesion. But ask anyone who's served and they'll tell you, it's not just about following orders, it's about belief. The Marine Corps is built on a core set of values: honor, courage, and commitment. Those values are drilled into every Marine from day one, not as slogans but as lived principles. And here's the surprising part. Marines are trained to operate with autonomy. In combat situations, they often have to make split-second decisions without direct orders. How can such a rigid institution allow such flexibility? Because the belief is the control. When values are deeply instilled, behavior aligns, even without oversight. This is what trust at scale looks like. It's also how great companies operate. Take Zappos, the online shoe retailer. Known for world-class customer service, Zappos doesn't script its support calls. Instead, they hire people who share the company's core belief, to deliver happiness, and then empower them to act in ways that reflect that belief. One famous story involves a Zappos representative who spent 10 hours on the phone with a customer. Not because they were forced to, but because they were free to. That's what happens when belief drives behavior. It's also why belief-based companies often outperform their competitors, not just in brand loyalty but in resilience. When the economy takes a hit, when industries shift, when trends evolve, companies anchored. In why adapt faster? Because their people aren't clinging to old strategies, they're committed to the core belief. And beliefs are timeless. This is why movements that start with why don't just survive, they thrive. They aren't dependent on a single person. They aren't reliant on a single tactic. They grow because they belong to everyone who believes. And here's the most important part, you don't need to be famous to lead this kind of movement. You just need to be clear, consistent, and committed. Whether you're leading a team, building a business, or starting something new, your job is to define the belief that drives you, and then to live it, loudly and authentically. Share your story. Make your decisions visible. Let people see what you stand for. And trust that those who believe what you believe will find you. That they'll follow. And that some of them will eventually lead others. Because that's how belief becomes culture. And culture becomes community. Let's revisit Apple one last time. Apple didn't dominate the tech industry just because of product design or marketing savvy. They built a tribe. A movement. People who believed in thinking differently. And when you bought an Apple product, you weren't just buying technology, you were buying into that identity. You were saying something about yourself. That's the real currency of belief, belonging. People want to be part of something bigger than themselves. They want to feel connected. And the moment your why aligns with their identity, you've built something far more powerful than a customer base, you've built a community. In the final section, we'll pull everything together. We'll revisit the golden circle, tie all the lessons into a cohesive framework, and give you a roadmap for how to lead, grow, and inspire with purpose. If you've been with us this far, you're not here by accident. You're here because something in this message resonates with what you believe. So hit that subscribe button, because this final section will show you how to turn all of this into a lifelong practice of meaningful leadership. Let's bring it all together. From the very beginning, we've been exploring a simple yet deeply powerful idea. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And throughout this journey, we've looked at stories, biology, behavior, leadership, and culture, all woven around this central truth. Now, as we close, we return to the golden circle. Why, how, what? The most successful and inspiring individuals and organizations operate in that order. They start with why, their purpose, cause, or belief. They articulate how they bring that belief to life, their values, principles, or unique methods. And then they show what they do, the tangible products, services, or results that are proof of their belief in action. Let's visualize it one last time. Why? This is your foundation. The cause that gives your actions meaning. How? These are your strengths, your consistent behaviors, the way you deliver on your why. What? These are your outcomes, the evidence of your belief. Most people and organizations start from the outside. They talk about what they do. A smaller number can explain how they do it. But very few start with why. And that's what separates good from great. Those who start from the inside out build trust. They inspire. They lead movements. Let's take a step back and think about what you can do, starting today. If you're an entrepreneur, leader, or creator, your why is the single most valuable asset you possess. It doesn't cost anything. It doesn't depreciate. And it doesn't depend on external conditions. It's yours. But only if you choose to own it. So here's the roadmap. Discover your why. Look at your life, your experiences, your proudest moments. What's the common thread? What kind of impact makes you feel alive? What contribution feels most authentic to you? Remember, your why is not aspirational, it's who you are when you're at your best. Define it clearly. Use the structure, to, contribution, so that, impact. This will help you articulate your purpose in a way that is focused and actionable. For example, to empower others through storytelling so that they feel seen, understood, and inspired. Align your how. Once you've defined your why, make sure your daily behaviors, systems, and values reflect it. These are the habits and principles that keep your why alive. Ask, what do I consistently do that brings this belief to life? Communicate your what. Finally, let your actions be proof of your belief. Whether it's your product, your leadership, or your message, it should all reflect your why. You're not selling a service. You're sharing a belief. You're not offering a job, you're inviting someone to join a cause. Lead with authenticity. The moment your actions match your words, people trust you. That's where influence begins. That's when leadership becomes legacy. Because the world doesn't need more clever slogans, polished strategies, or empty goals. It needs people who believe. People who care. People who act with intention. It needs leaders, not just those with titles, but those with purpose. And here's the beautiful truth, you don't have to be famous to inspire. You don't have to be powerful to lead. You just need to know your why, and live it. Every day. In every decision. With every person you meet. Because when you do, people will feel it. They'll be drawn to it. And they'll carry it forward. That's how movements grow. That's how change happens. One person. One belief. One action at a time. So let's recap the journey. We started with the question, why are some people and organizations more innovative, more influential, more inspiring than others, even when they have the same resources? We explored the golden circle and saw how starting with why transforms communication, strategy, and leadership. We looked at real-world examples: Apple, Dr. King, the Wright brothers, Southwest Airlines, Patagonia, leaders who don't just say they believe in something, but show it consistently. We examined the biology of decision-making and the psychology of inspiration. We understood how trust scales, how culture spreads, and how to build teams and communities rooted in purpose. And now, we return to you, with the challenge to start with why. So here's your next step. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for perfection. Just start. Start asking why. Start living from your core. Start aligning your how and your what with your purpose. And start sharing that belief with others, boldly, consistently, and unapologetically. Because whether you're launching a business, leading a team, creating content, raising a family, or building a movement, your why is your power. Own it. Live it. Share it. And remember, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. If this series has resonated with you, if you felt a shift in how you see leadership, purpose, or even yourself, do one more thing. Subscribe to the channel. Share this message with someone who needs to hear it. And keep going. The world needs more people who start with why. Thanks for being one of them.